Would you like to see regime change in Russia, just like Putin gone?
Sure, but I think that it's not gonna help seriously. 80% of Russians supporting Putin, and it's kind of like, when you slave, when you get your freedom, you don't know what to do with this.
The war has pushed prices up. They could go as high as $200 a barrel, some analysts think. How long is it fair to expect American drivers and drivers around the world to pay that premium for this war?
As long as it takes. So Russia cannot, in fact, defeat Ukraine and move beyond Ukraine.
Ukraine is losing almost 200 soldiers per day. How many Ukrainian soldiers will have to be sacrificed in order to get all those territories back?
I cannot tell you, but for sure that we will be standing until we get what we deserve.
Слава Україні! Героям слава! Слава Україні! Героям слава! Слава Україні! Героям слава!
I'm Jeremy Lafredo for Rebel News in Times Square, where Ukrainian activists have organized a War is Not Over rally to garner U.S. support for the ongoing war in Ukraine.
The United States government has already sent over $40 billion in U.S. tax money to Ukraine, but many of the protesters here argued that wasn't enough. The protesters called on the U.S. taxpayer to send more weapons in order to, quote, speed up the war.
We believe, maybe we're wrong, but I hope we're not, that U.S. could just speed this war a little bit, make the end sooner.
What is the most important type of aid do you think Ukrainians need right now from the U.S.?
It's definitely the weapons, because it's really important to help the refugees and send as much help as possible. But the weapons help everyone. They help the U.S., they help the Ukrainians, they help the refugees.
So we need more artillery, for sure. We just need more weapons.
If we have 2,000 weapons like that, HIMARS in stock rooms, and we give 4 or 5 to Ukraine, it's unbelievable. It shouldn't be like that.
There was a consensus at the rally that the U.S. should aim for regime change in Russia on behalf of Ukraine, a dangerous geopolitical favor, considering Russia is a nuclear superpower.
So you would like to see, regime change in Russia, Putin gone?
Yes, we do.
Would you like to see regime change in Russia, Putin gone?
Absolutely.
Using U.S. taxpayer money to push Russia back to their border wasn't enough for some protesters. Some vaguely argued that Russia must be defeated entirely.
If they just go back to their borders, they'll come back again. If there's a peace deal where we are not fully sure.
So just moving Russia back to the border is not enough?
No. They need to be defeated.
Regime change wasn't the answer to this protester, who said the problem was in fact all Russian people.
Would you like to see regime change in Russia, just like Putin gone?
Sure, but I think that it's not gonna help seriously. 80% of Russians supporting Putin, and it's kind of like, when you slave, when you get your freedom, you don't know what to do with this. The problem is not only in Putin. It's all Russians, and they always had some kind of tsar, king, tsar in Russian. So they used to this regime, and they don't know how to live differently.
The protesters donned provocative signs and even costumes. Some compared Putin to Hitler, and others used the imagery of children and women to garner support for more weapons shipments. The theme was that weapons and artillery would end the war, when normally they do the opposite. The Ukrainian military is currently losing more than 200 soldiers per day. For these protesters, that wasn't a concern. They were more than willing to spend more US dollars and Ukrainian lives to defeat Russia.
We cannot, and we're not going to give up any territories at all.
Nothing at all. So what's happening right now is Ukraine is losing almost 200 soldiers per day. How many Ukrainian soldiers will have to be sacrificed in order to get all those territories back?
I cannot tell you, but for sure that we will be standing until we get what we deserve.
While these protesters echoed the claims of the current U.S. administration that the fight against Russia is a fight for democracy.
The war has pushed prices up. They could go as high as $200 a barrel, some analysts think. How long is it fair to expect American drivers and drivers around the world to pay that premium for this war?
As long as it takes. So Russia cannot, in fact, defeat Ukraine and move beyond Ukraine.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky recently banished and seized the assets of 11 opposition parties. One of the banished parties received 14% of the national vote last election. Zelensky's excuse was that they have vague, quote, ties to Russia. This authoritarian move of banning political opposition was approved of by the protesters. They explained that the constituency of these parties needs to be, quote, re-educated.
It's definitely overdue. There have been so many parties that are really working, that have been working for Russia for years, and it was really concerning that nothing was being done before that. So I definitely support it. You know, it should have been done way sooner. Now that it's done, that's fine, but I think they even need to go further.
One of those parties, you know, during the last election received 13% of the national vote. What do you do with the people who voted for these parties that are now banished?
Unfortunately, that's how Russian propaganda operates. So unfortunately, those people need to be educated.
Despite the average American paying a record portion of their paychecks on gas and food, the protesters argued, similar to TV talking heads, that this is unimportant compared to upholding the, quote, world order.
This is way more than about just gas prices or any other prices. I mean, this is democracy, and like the whole world order is at stake.
For Rebel News in New York City's Times Square, I'm Jeremy Lafredo. If you want to keep up to date with my reports from New York and get the other side of the story, go to rebelnews.com.